Caleb Olson, down in Mexico. Buenos dias, senor. Welcome to the podcast.
Buenos dias. Thanks for having me.
We were just rapping out about what the hell you're doing down there in Mexico. So maybe just summarize for the audience one more time, because it seems like you're on a bit of an adventure.
Yeah, it is an adventure. Short story is I'm here for a race on Saturday called Reto Volcano that goes up the side of a volcano here called Pico de Orizaba. So it's like a high altitude sub ultra race. That'll be a new little challenge for me. See if I can turn over the ultra legs quickly.
So do you actually summit Orizaba? Isn't that the highest peak in Mexico?
It is the highest peak in Mexico. You don't actually summit. You go up to, there's like a few different like huts, like refuges along the route. And so you go up to the highest hut that people would like sleep at the night before they go summit. But it's at about 15,500 feet, which is still a little over 3,000 feet from the summit.
Yeah, damn. It's funny. I was in Monterrey, Mexico for work, an underrated place, a really cool adventurous spot in northern Mexico. And the place where I was working had this huge blown up photograph on the wall of the peak of Orizaba. And when I talked to the guy who I was doing some work with, he said, "Oh, you see this spot on the mountain here? It's called the sarcophagus." Of course, you know, it has a Spanish word, but it translates to the sarcophagus, apparently an ominous spot on the mountain. So make sure you stay away from that area. Okay.
Yeah. Good to know. I'm planning on trying to go for the summit the day after the race if I still have legs for it. So
rad. Well, I know you're a mountaineer. I know you're a bit of an alpinist yourself. I was going to ask you about it, but we got to start in a traditional place here, Caleb. My opening question for you is, what makes you, you? I ask everybody here on the show the same question. Get introspective. Introduce us to Caleb Olson.
All right. Yeah. I knew this one was coming. So I asked my wife for some help, and I was curious what she would say. And I think she gave me some ideas that I think line up pretty well with what I was thinking. But I think that part of what makes me is part of why I like ultra running is it lets you like experience emotions and high highs and low lows that you don't get in normal life. And I think I'm a pretty like steady person. Like usually my emotional range is like from a 4 to a 6, and I don't go much outside that. And so ultra running lets me get a bigger, range of feelings. And as part of that, I think I tend to be pretty like logical and more like in my head than in my heart. So I think I'm a like thinking driven person who, likes to challenge myself and try new things. And I think I like things that I'm good at. So I can get pretty passionate about things that I find that I do well at or that I'm interested in. I can go deep on those. But the opposite's also true. If I'm not good at something or not interested in something, I have a hard time really focusing on it or doing well at it.
Which is natural. So what are the things that you're particularly good at aside from running?
When I asked my wife, she said cooking was one that came to her mind. I really like cooking.
All right.
I've been on quite the reading frenzy this year. One of my goals for this year was to read 10 books, which I wanted to set something I felt like I could easily hit, and I have definitely surpassed that, but I've been really liking reading this year.
What are you reading?
Right now, I just finished the Red Rising series. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's like a sci-fi. And then I just started a Greek mythology book for this trip. So all kinds of stuff. It's been all over the spectrum from like philosophy to sci-fi, fantasy, all over the place.
I love it, man. So trail running gets you out of your head and into your heart. A great way to start. You posted recently after CCC that you've become a fan of tennis. I'm a fan of tennis myself, and you posted something to the effect of "pressure is a privilege." It's a sign that hangs at the U.S. Open Stadium, Arthur Ashe Stadium in New York City. Are you into tennis right now? Tell me about that.
I am I like tennis and pickleball. My wife Morgan got me a tennis racket when we first started dating because she was really into it. Her mom's really into it. And so we have played a decent amount. I'm not very good at it, but I like playing. And then I've also, probably more than actually playing tennis, I'm into like following tennis, like watching, I think the Breakpoint series on Netflix got me even more into it. I read a book called Open by Andre Agassi this year that was really good. And then just like following tournaments sometimes. I'm a fan. I like watching.
It's funny because I feel like tennis is in a similar place right now in trail running, and that there's kind of a changing of the guard happening with the current greats and then the new school greats. So, for example, Serena Williams, Roger Federer recently retired. Nadal is pretty much there too. Djokovic is still top of his game seemingly, but then you got Sinner and Alcaraz, who are coming up through the ranks and very much, showing what the next generation holds for the professional level of the sport. And obviously we're sort of seeing something similar in trail running. But anyway, as we were just saying before we pressed record, obviously you and I don't know each other super well. I've been following your career for a couple of years and was really excited to just have you on the show, learn a little bit more about your story. Herbert Crable wrote a little piece about you on freetrail.com, which gave me a great little intro. And in it, he said that you grew up in the Pacific Northwest. Obviously, you live in Salt Lake now, which we'll talk about here in a second, but that you grew up mountaineering. So coming back to what we opened the conversation with, tell me about that. Where did you grow up in the Pacific Northwest, and when did you get introduced to the mountains?
Yeah, so I grew up on the east side of Seattle, like 20 minutes from Seattle in a city called Sammamish, kind of near like Issaquah, North Bend areas, something more people tend to be familiar with, I think. But I grew up, I did cross country out there, and I think we had these family friends who had a kid near my age who was starting to get into trouble, and his dad was friends with my dad, and they like got together one night and they're like, how can we keep our kids out of trouble? Let's get them into mountaineering. Let's go do Mount Rainier together. And so at like 15, to prep for that, we went and did pretty much all of the Pacific Northwest volcanoes over like the course of a summer, and then capped it all off with Mount Rainier summit. And then since then, that just kind of like lit the fire. I was pretty obsessed with mountaineering all through high school. Like I remember sitting in class, just like Googling mountains in the Himalayas and stuff like that, making little PowerPoint presentations of like why my parents should let me take a trip to the Himalayas to go do 8,000 meter peaks at like age 18. But that's kind of the background I was coming from.
Really? You're building pitch decks to go on mountaineering expeditions for your parents?
Oh, I've built a lot of pitch decks for my parents in my days. Yeah. But for some reason, maybe that's where I get the logical thing from, but pitch decks worked on them.
Yeah. You got to create a good argument to land, to close the deal, so to speak. What are your top exploits? I know like the picture that was included in freetrail.com was you on Denali. You posted about how you and your wife Morgan summited Mont Blanc just before CCC this year. What are some of the biggest accomplishments in mountaineering, or maybe the most harrowing and memorable experiences?
Yeah, I think Denali was like the biggest kind of expedition I've done. Like we were up there, I did it with my dad, and we were on the mountain for like 19 days. It was a really long trip. It was before I was into trail running. So that style of kind of slowly slogging along, carrying like 100 pounds worth of gear, it was kind of all I knew. I thought that was the only way to do it. If I went back and did some of those things now, I think I'd try it in a different style. But I think a lot of the more harrowing ones have not been iconic things. It's more just been like poorly researched things that I've tried to go do with friends. Like we did the Ptarmigan Traverse last year with a friend on the Pacific Northwest, and it wasn't harrowing so much as just like heinous. Like the last 8 miles of that route are so brutal, just like bushwhacking and hopping over dead trees, and it's just the slowest going route after a really long day out, and things like that I think have been some of the tougher times I've had out in mountains. But what is
the practice taught you about life and risk taking, teamwork? Because, obviously in a sport like ours, a lot of people come from traditional road, cross country background. Obviously you did a little bit of that as well, but and some people sort of are coming from ski mountaineering, cycling, et cetera, team sports, even in my case. But mountaineering is a different mindset and a different approach to bring to trail running. And I'm sure there's a lot of lessons in just the sheer misery and suffering inherent in that practice.
Yeah, I think one of the key things is you got to be careful. It's made me really selective with who I'll do that kind of thing with, because you're going to be like, often you're literally like tied on a rope to each other. You can't, like, it would be unsafe to untie. So you are like actually stuck with them for like hours and hours. And so if it's someone who is going to be annoying you, or like who you don't totally trust that can handle the terrain, or like save you, I guess, like sometimes you literally are counting on them to be able to self-arrest and catch a fall. So it makes you be selective and like pick people who you really want to go spend that time with, and kind of learn what the pros and cons of different people in different situations are, and know like, all right, maybe like I'll trade off a little bit of fitness with this partner for like a great attitude on this route, or something like that. I think having that has also made me, like, in life in general, it's made me identify like, all right, I need help with this thing, or I want to do this thing. I need to find somebody who fits these certain attributes, and I can sacrifice other attributes, even though like it might not be ideal. This person is the right fit for this job,
the right,
or this
complementing skill set.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really interesting. What about the sheer toughness and suffering? I mean, especially like something like Denali, if you're on the mountain for 19 days, there's actually a great John Krakauer quote about this. I'll maybe pull it up while you're answering, but there's something about just the prolonged suffering and discomfort that is romantic, and that is, I mean, it's the definition of type 2 fun, where when you're there, you're probably dreaming of home, and when you're at home, you're probably dreaming of being at base camp. So
yeah, totally.
maybe share a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a pretty good way of summarizing it. Another book that I've read this year is a book by Mark Twight called Kiss or Kill. That's like a collection of short stories about alpinism and like his adventures all over the world. And he said something kind of similar, but I thought it was interesting. Like, I think often mountaineering has kind of this romanticized, like there's a John Muir quote, like, I'd rather be in the mountains thinking about God than in church thinking about the mountains, or something like that. And I think like when you're out there suffering through it, like it is brutal, but it's only as brutal as you make it. Like if you want to get yourself into these super challenging situations, it's like signing up for a 100-miler and then running it super hard, or backing off when it starts to hurt. Like you can choose how you want to handle it. And if you're basically doing the equivalent of pushing through puking at mile 80, but on the mountain, and you're just like getting whipped by cold wind and it kind of sucks, and you want to turn around, like it can be brutal. But I think if you go into it with the mindset of like, I just want to see what I can do, where I can go on this day, and like I'm in it for the views or for this time with this person, and you go in, it's less about like summiting or a specific objective or a certain time or something like that. I think those can be fun to focus on, but if you're not doing that, it can be as fun as you want to make it. So yeah, it doesn't always need to be brutal.
Okay, I found this Krakauer quote and it's perfect.
Yeah, right.
So I'll just read it real quick. You can respond and we can move on. But this is from Into Thin Air, his iconic book. Have you read that? You must have.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. To our audience, you got to put it on your list. What he says is, above the comforts of base camp, the expedition, in fact, became almost Calvinistic undertaking. The ratio of misery to pleasure was greater by an order of magnitude than any mountain I had been on. I quickly came to understand that climbing Everest was primarily about enduring pain. And in subjecting ourselves to week after week of toil, tedium, and suffering, it struck me that most of us were probably seeking, above all else, something like a state of grace. It's very similar to trail running, isn't it? Where, as you said, at mile 80, it's going to suck. Do you keep your foot on the gas? Do you keep going? Or do you back off? You choose how to see it. And many of us are seeking that state of grace and that unknown.
Yeah, totally.
Anyway,
And it's kind of similar. Like it lets you experience that full range of emotion. Like you get the high highs when you hit the summit and it's perfect sunrise. And then you get the really low lows when it's not at all like that. And it's cloudy and freezing and dangerous and you just want to be off.
yeah. Okay. So I want to talk to you a bunch about Salt Lake City. So maybe first tell us how you ended up in Utah after growing up outside Seattle.
Sure. Yeah. So I had some family in Utah. I used to go out and visit. Like I grew up in Washington, but I grew up going out to Utah probably like once a year. So I kind of knew the area. I ended up going out there for mostly for the mountain access. I think the main thing that appealed to me about it was that in the Pacific Northwest, you get these amazing mountains. It's awesome. But you have to travel like 45 minutes to 2 hours to get to the good stuff. And in Utah, I can live at the foothills of 11,000 foot peaks. It's really beautiful. It's probably not quite as cool as some of those Washington mountains, but the access makes up for it, I think. And while it wasn't originally what got me out there, the community that I found out there, I think is what keeps me out there.
So were you running at this point, or when did you start to discover?
Running. I was rock climbing, ice climbing, skiing, fishing, and like jogging half marathons occasionally, but I was not really running. Really quickly after moving to Utah, I signed up for my first ultra, and I did that probably 3 months after I had moved out to Utah.
So tell me about the vibe in Salt Lake City right now, because it feels like there's a feeling of momentum and camaraderie among the training community there. Can you describe how the Wasatch Trail community has contributed, especially to the last few years of success for you, and what's happening there right now?
Yeah, definitely. So I think starting like 4 or 5 years ago when I got into the trail running scene, I did a local race called the Corner Canyon 50K and met a couple of friends. Finn Melanson was one of them. Grant Barnett, a few key guys in the Wasatch area. And it was just like an immediate network where as soon as I was in with them, I think they like recognized something in me that I had the potential to be able to run with them and hang with them. And they just took me in and immediately introduced me to everybody I could possibly ever want to know in the Wasatch. And so I really quickly went from like 0 to 100 in being connected with the trail community. And now it seems like every year we're getting more and more like high profile people moving out there or rising up from people who already have been out there. And so it's just a really fun, like it feels like this pendulum swinging that is just like gaining momentum. And we keep, there are certain, I guess it feels like we've got kind of a team out there. Like we don't always all train together, but we've got this critical mass of people where any given thing you could possibly want to do, you can throw it out in a group chat and you're going to find at least a few people who want to go join you for it. It
seems like you and Dakota and Tyler Green have all been getting out together recently too. Those guys in particular, maybe it'd be interesting to hear you talk about how they've influenced you, because they've both been in the game for a lot longer than you. Dakota's still in his mid-30s, so he's not quite as old as myself and Tyler are at this point, but certainly just as experienced as anybody. And obviously, Tyler's been massively successful, especially in the last 5 years. Is there anything in particular that those guys have taught you or that's rubbed off on you as you've built this new professional career?
Yeah, I just started getting out with Dakota kind of recently, actually. I think after Western States, we were able to finally connect and like exchange contact information. He travels a lot, so it was a little harder to pin him down and get in some runs together. But yeah, now that we've been running together, I think it's really interesting to hear his perspective on like basically the state of the sport and like hearing about where it has come from and where it is now. Like it surprises me how not disconnected, because he's still very much in it, but like almost like he didn't even know. He's like, what do I need to do to qualify for UTMB next year? Like if I want to run UTMB, like it's funny just hearing like, because he's been in it so long, seen so many changes and hasn't like had the bandwidth to follow all of these changes. It's funny how like it feels like he's really in it for like just the purity of like running and not for like didn't understand what UTMB index meant or like how do I get in there, like any of this kind of stuff like that.
I'm glad it's not just
in it
me
for any of those kind of extra things. It's just for the purity of enjoying running and loving competition. I've been getting out a lot with Tyler. He's been awesome to train with. I think I've been getting a lot of confidence from just seeing like basically that I guess his encouragement really like that I'm doing the right things. It's validating to hear like that I'm on the right track, and I don't have a coach. So having him tell me like, yeah, what you're doing like seems like it's working well for you and makes sense. And he is a coach. So getting that kind of validation from someone with experience and knowledge of like how to train is really helpful. And then just doing runs together is really fun.
So how do you know what to do if you don't have a coach? I mean, that's pretty interesting. I mean, of course, you said you did run cross country as a kid, but your focus was in tagging peaks, it sounds like, and you've discovered this amazing talent for yourself. And I think for a lot of people, they'd be encouraged to get guidance and leadership that would help them, break through to the next level. Tell me about how you organize your training and how you gather the right information to feel confident in guiding yourself.
Yeah, I think that's where I've leaned on the community a lot. Like I'm good friends with like Jimmy Elam and like Mike and Leah, Yingling and McMonagle, and like just all these people who have all this experience doing long races. And so basically, if I just do most of my running with other people who seem to know what they're doing, that has gotten me pretty far. And then I'll do like sanity checks sometimes. Like I'll throw together some numbers in a spreadsheet and say like, I think these are going to be my weekly goals between now and Western States, let's say, for example, last year. And I'll do like a sanity check with people who I've been introduced to, like Brett Hornig is a coach. And so I'll run it by him and just say like, does this seem crazy? Does this seem doable? And getting that kind of like, yeah, that it doesn't seem like you're totally crazy. That's gotten me a ways. I do think I'm starting to get to the point where so far most of my formula has just been like every year I've found that I can handle a little more. And so it's been mostly just increasing volume. I started from very little, and now I've gotten myself to a point where I feel like it's similar to what my peers are doing. But I do think I'm to a point now where I don't want to continue increasing volume and having that be the only real dial I can tweak. And so I am starting to look for like a coach and what's next. How can I focus more on quality rather than just upping quantity gradually over the years? So I think that's kind of where my next like set of potential improvements lies, is in focusing on quality.
So, but you're contemplating getting some outside counsel on it?
I am. I've been talking to some potential coaches recently, and I have an idea of where I want to go with that, but I haven't done anything official yet.
Is without naming names, you don't have to, but I'm sure the audience would find this interesting. As you're evaluating the options, what do you personally look for? Because some coaches index on science and data, numbers, some index more on the emotional side, motivation, some of those less quantifiable feelings, sensations. Where do you sit on that spectrum, and or what sorts of things are you looking for in a coach?
I think I'm definitely more of a science and numbers guy. I get more out of that than like I know some coaches are more like, I've asked a lot of people what they think of their coaches to get kind of an idea of who to reach out to and where to look. And I do hear like, I think I've tended to be more drawn to talking to the ones who have the science and numbers background and less of like the emotional or like, yeah, they're really encouraging. Like, I don't need encouragement. I don't need motivation really. Like, I'm pretty self-motivated. What I really want is like, here's what you've been doing. Here's what you could have been doing much better. And here's what this is going to look like moving forward if you want to improve. And this is because, and like they can justify it for some scientific reason to me. I think I have a hard time because I've been doing this myself for a long time and I've seen improvement and I've gotten myself to a decent spot. I have a hard time giving trust in my training over to somebody else. And so I want I think whoever I have coach me, I want to be able to challenge them and say, why are you having me do that? That's not like anything I've ever done before. Can you explain to me like what the purpose of that is? And so I want someone who can answer those kind of questions.
It's finding the right partner, just like back in your mountaineering
exactly.
heyday, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting. And it's exactly the opposite of what I would look for. So again, that's why these are fun conversations to have. So speaking of spreadsheets and science and data, I heard you work at Salesforce too. So maybe give us a quick glimpse into your professional life, personal life, how those things interact with your athletic life too. Because I mean, one of the things that's interesting about you thinking about getting a coach now is because like, man, you've established a really interesting foundation and you can prove that you can compete with anybody in the world on your day. And so then it's like, okay, well, how do I get to that next level? And, getting a coach is one of those things, but also your athletic life interacts a lot with your professional life, your personal life too. So where are you with that now? And has anything changed?
Yeah, things have changed over the past year and a half. So I don't work for Salesforce. I do Salesforce development. So I work with companies that use Salesforce as a product, and a lot of companies need customizations done. So I go in and I'll like build out automation and customizations on their Salesforce platform. So I used to do that full time as a consultant, like at a consulting firm with lots of different clients. That for a brief time, actually not that brief, for a couple of years, I was actually also doing like a nighttime contracting thing on top of that and trying to run. And it was just a lot. I did that up until about a year and a half ago. And then something had to give. And so I quit the full-time job and I just took on what was previously like the nighttime contracts. Mm-hmm. I had that be the new full-time thing. So I do full-time contracting now as a developer, and it's very flexible. The schedule is like, as long as I get the work done, they don't care really. Like I have a couple meetings each day, but it's not bad at all. And I can go run whenever I want, as long as I'm getting my work done. So
you're like a software developer.
Yeah.
Is that a part of your analytical and I don't know, like that's a different brain than I use in my day-to-day life, more or less. But does that skill set or does that mindset bleed into your running at all?
I think so. Yeah. There's not always a lot of creative juices flowing. It's more, logical. Like, all right, if this happens, then this needs to happen. And here's the order of everything that needs to happen in order for this to go out right, like for work. And I do think a lot of that carries over to how I treat life and running. Like, whenever we have anything personal going on, I feel like the first thing I do is like make a spreadsheet for it and like say, all right, here's the timeline of like, how are we going to reach this goal? Or like, how are we going to prepare for this thing that's coming up? And I treat racing the same way. I have a spreadsheet for every race I've done in the past like 2 years with like, what training do I need to do between now and then? What are my splits? What's my nutrition plan? That sort of thing. And I enjoy that. It helps me feel prepared and like I'm trying my best to manage the variables.
Do you feel like you will be able to sustain your professional career and your athletic career? Like, it feels manageable and sustainable at the moment?
So far it does. Yeah. They've been really flexible. This job that I'm working right now has been really flexible. I've been doing it for a couple of years and it seems like I've gotten into a good groove where I can balance things well. I think in order to continue living how I live now, I need it to work. So that's also motivating. Yeah. If things ever change and I'm suddenly just making a ton of money off trail running, then maybe I won't need that job so much. But I think until then it's manageable and I can do both without it really affecting it.
Yeah, I'm just personally curious because obviously in my day, everybody had a side job and it's becoming more and more the case where people are going full time. And I just view you as being very representative of this next generation in the sport. And I feel like there's going to be a much higher proportion of athletes who are full-time trail runners than there were in previous generations. And so potentially people like you would be at a disadvantage, although there's obviously always those counterexamples of people who do balance things very well, yourself included. So let's speak more specifically about your career. Maybe let's just start with last year because, obviously you'd been around the game for a little while, but last year was a big breakthrough. You were second behind Drew Holman at Lake Sonoma, which was the qualifier for the Worlds team. You went to Austria, competed at the World Championship, had a tough day. So maybe for the audience, if you could just compare and contrast those two running events, what you think led to success at Lake Sonoma, why you struggled on the bigger stage.
Yeah, I was so motivated going into Lake Sonoma to make the Worlds team. I thought that would just be the coolest thing ever. That was like my goal for the year was to make the Worlds team. And I trained hard. We had a really snowy winter and I was like out there slogging through knee deep snow every day, just putting in the effort. And I think, I don't know that I was, I don't know. I was probably similarly fit between the two. I just wanted it so bad at the qualifier at Lake Sonoma. And I think it was also short enough and fast enough of a course that I could get away with some mistakes that I didn't realize I was making. Like I had not figured out my nutrition strategy. I had never really stepped back and thought like I need to nail down nutrition because I'd never had major problems with it. And like Sonoma, I survived. I wouldn't say I nailed nutrition, but it was fine. And then I was so relieved after and like happy and just celebrating the fact that I had made the team that I didn't really actually think about that race at all. Like the actual World Championship race. I was like, that's the celebration that like I already made it. Now I'm just going to go have fun and enjoy the moment. And like, I think until like the week of, I didn't feel any pressure or like anxiety about the race, which was nice and it was fun. But the flip side of that is I was not as motivated to prepare for it because I didn't have that same drive going into it. It was a really, really hard course, like the vertiest course per mile I think I've ever done.
Yeah.
And I got out there all excited trying to hang with all the teammates and they were just way better prepared than I was. I fell apart pretty quickly. And once I started realizing I was having a bad day, I kind of got in my head, got like sad about it. And I tried really hard to hold it together. The top three people score. And there were three Americans ahead of me, one behind me for most of the day. And I was like, if any of those three, I don't know what's going on ahead of me, but if any of those three twist an ankle or drop out or anything happens, they need me to be able to finish. And like, I got to still do as much as I can. And so I was really trying hard, but my stomach completely fell apart. I was puking. Like I probably puked like 30 times in the last 20 miles. It just felt like every step I was like getting nauseous and then getting dizzy. And I'd lay down with I was laying down on the trail at one point and some dude came by and was like, if you put your legs above your head, the blood will come back to your stomach and then you'll be able to get control of it. So I laid there with my legs above my head, trying to get it back. And everybody
brilliant.
Like,
I got to try that sometime.
I was okay. Yeah, it was brutal, but I don't know. I learned a lot from that. I realized that I couldn't keep getting by on just making it work with nutrition. I needed a real plan. I focused a lot on that and have seen some big changes since then. And then also it made me realize I think I'm aiming too low to just make teams like that. I want to continue to make teams like that, but then not just be present, but actually like shoot for the win or the podium at races like that.
You got to want it like you did at Lake Sonoma in order to perform on that stage. Did it teach you anything about like rising to the occasion? Because you had done CCC twice at that point. Of course, CCC in itself is a world championship level event. You finished in the teens both times. And then, you had another opportunity, your first opportunity to be on Team USA. And those opportunities don't always come. So there's maybe lessons about how to rise to those moments. Is there anything there that you came home with about, just like when you arrive on that stage, ensuring that you're maybe psychologically, emotionally prepared for it?
Yeah, definitely. Like I really want redemption now. Like I would love to go back to the Worlds and like go out to the Pyrenees this year and try and redeem myself because I feel like I have so much more to offer. And like, that is a really special opportunity that doesn't come around all the time. It's never going to be easy to make one of those teams. like whether it's through the qualifier or through the application, you've got to be one of the best in the US to make those teams. And so to get chosen for that really is a privilege. And I think if I have the opportunity to go back out at some point, I'm definitely going to be very focused on that race. And it's going to be the main focus of the season.
Hell yeah. Well, you bounced back quickly. You won the Grindstone 100K, which punched your golden ticket to Western States, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, even though I understand that wasn't the express motivation for going to it. That was the downstream consequences. And then you obviously got second at Ultra Trail Cape Town to end last season, which then put you in the fortunate position to sign a professional contract with Nike. So you could sort of buckle all that stuff together into one answer, but finishing with a ton of momentum in your 2023 season and having that validated by the biggest company in the world who wanted to align themselves with you as an athlete in the early phases of your career, and especially going toe to toe with people like Dmitry Mityev at Ultra Trail Cape Town, it probably reframes the way you see yourself as an athlete. So maybe coming around to a question, how did like Grindstone and Ultra Trail Cape Town and eventually this partnership with Nike make you rethink your career, your position in the sport, things like that?
Yeah, I think like at the most basic level, I think it comes down to like confidence and believing in myself and like having certain expectations for myself. Like going back to what we were just talking about, like the whole dream with the world's team was making it, not necessarily doing well there, because I didn't really believe in myself that I could do well there, I think. And so like my level of confidence was I would like to make this team. And now I think it was kind of similar at Grindstone, where I wasn't aiming for a golden ticket. I thought my level of confidence is I want to requalify for CCC. I'm confident I can do that because I knew what that took. And I thought that was more likely. And each time I do one of those races and things go well and I kind of realize like what I can do, I think the bar for my self-belief and confidence goes up a bit and my expectations for myself go up. So like, I mean, it's a similar story. I could keep saying this, but like same thing at Cape Town. Like I remember looking at that starting list and being like, okay, best case scenario, I think I could get fifth at this field. Like I made my splits. I made my spreadsheet for what I thought would probably get me top 5. Some things changed up with like with the entrance list in the week leading up to the race and stuff. But I went in there and surprised myself and did better than I thought I could and beat some people that I thought in theory would be beating me. And so when each time that happens, I get a little more confidence in myself. And for the next race, I aim higher and think I can do more. And I tend to do better as that continues happening. And I think with Nike now backing me, like I think it's less about like having a confidence boost from that. I get more of a confidence boost from doing well in races, but having the support to now like I hate spending money on running. And so if I can be getting free shoes and just not getting injured because I constantly have fresh shoes to run in whenever my old ones get like more worn out, or traveling out to races or getting massages and going to PTs because I've got a budget for that stuff, like that helps a lot. And I think that allows me to be able to like actually reach the potential that my self-belief is now letting me think I have.
Hell yeah. So I think it was, it must have been after Ultra Trail Cape Town. Actually, I think it was on like the Western States broadcast this year. I said something like you had finished second at Ultra Trail Cape Town in your first international race, and a bunch of people messaged me like, no, you idiot. He's done CCC twice and the world championships. So, coming back to Ultra Trail Cape Town just briefly, sometimes it does require a learning curve to go and race internationally too. And sometimes a lot of that is like lifestyle based, when you arrive, how you eat, how you adjust to jet lag, things like that. Is there anything about Ultra Trail Cape Town that made it like your first really significant and successful international race?
I think part of it was how much fun it was. Like, I've had fun at all of the international races. A huge part of why I even like trail running and why I'm doing this is because I love seeing the world. And I think doing a race in different cool places in the world is like the best way to see it. And Ultra Trail Cape Town was that, plus having like a whole squad of our closest Salt Lake friends going out together, and just kind of like the way that race is run and organized. They treat elite athletes so well. They support so well. The whole thing was just like this awesome party from like, I don't know, you felt like somebody out there, and like you're going out to eat these fun dinners with all your friends and with all the race organizers. And that one was one of the easiest, even though it was like the farthest time zone away from here I've ever been. It was one of the easiest ones to get used to, just because I immediately like felt so comfortable and was having so much fun that it felt like it wasn't even like a big adjustment. So I do think there's a learning curve there, and getting used to international racing can be tricky, but I don't think I did anything super differently. I don't have some magic getting over jet lag technique or only eating plain white rice or anything like that. I think it was just if you can go to places you're excited about and have a lot of fun and be out there with friends, I think that's a recipe for a good race.
All right. So 3 lessons from the podcast so far. You got to pick great partners in mountaineering, in trail running, in life. You got to really want it when you arrive at a race, and you got to have fun. Okay. Yep. So those are 3 important things to leave our audience with. Talking about this season, obviously the major highlight was Western States. But before we get to that, I was just looking at your ultra sign up, and it seemed like you did 4 50Ks in the span of like 2 months in the wintertime, and felt like an intentional strategic way to build up towards Western States, your first 100-miler. So what was the intention strategy behind that early season high volume of racing at the 50K distance?
Yeah. So Mad Moose puts on this series called the Triple Crown of Moab. Moab's not too far of a drive from where I'm at, and it's like January through March. And that's a time where Utah is getting hammered by snow, northern Utah. So the whole Salt Lake area, there's still like trails will get packed out. You can still run in the foothills, but it's hard to get in high quality, longer runs when it's that snowy. So I think the main motivation was just, I wanted to be able to go down and every 3 or 4 weeks have a nice 30-mile decent effort run. And those races are all fairly like rolly, not a ton of elevation gain. They're over pretty quick. It's all like 3.5 to a little over 4 hour races. So I kind of got to the point where I could knock those out and feel like totally fine after. I wasn't not trying, but I wasn't like going super hard in any of them. And so I could just train through them, recover really quickly. And it kind of normalized the 50K distance, which was really nice, because then going into like, as things started to melt out in Utah and I was able to start ramping up general training, I was really confident I could knock out 30-mile runs at a decent pace and recover quickly. And so I think that just set me up with a really good base going into like peak Western States training when I started adding in more altitude and elevation.
Awesome. You also had a great race at the 85K at Madeira. We'll skip over that for the purposes of being efficient with time and cut straight to the chase here with Western States. Obviously, it's been a few months now to fully absorb the performance. You probably significantly outperformed your own expectations, surprised yourself in a positive way. Of course, 14:40, the fastest debut ever in your 100-mile debut. I guess with some perspective, like what created the conditions for that special of a day? Like, was there something about training, the mindset, how bad you wanted it, the level of fun you were having that left you primed for that breakthrough?
Yeah, I think I did go into it with the right mindset. It was my first 100-mile. And so I knew that I wanted to finish at all costs. And if I'm going to finish at all costs, I may as well have it be over as quickly as I possibly can. So I went into it with the mindset of like, I feel fit. I think I can surprise some people out here. And it's fun to kind of be an underdog. Like even though I had a good previous year, I had just signed with Nike, I still felt like people weren't really expecting much from me and didn't really, know too much about me, especially in the 100-mile world, because I hadn't done one before. So it's a fun spot to be in where expectations are low, but you feel confident and like you can go out and exceed expectations. And so I think all of that, plus like seeing all of my friends and people in Salt Lake community who had done Western States before, and like I was getting a lot of intel on like, all right, when you hit this point, like basically just different memories that people had from different races that they had done where they knew that a challenging part was coming up. I felt like I was able to connect with them as I was doing that course and remember things that many different people had said to me along the way. And that made it feel like I had the support of a lot of people with me the whole time I was running. And then, I think to answer your question, that's kind of what set me up for a good day, I think.
So great. It's funny. Now Tyler Green is a neighbor of yours, a friend and training partner. He was a recent transplant just before Western States, but I had an exchange with him on the infield just after he finished. And he said that there was a moment in the race that you guys shared at least some time together on the course. And there was a moment where you gained separation on him and he thought you were burning too many matches too early in the day. Have you guys talked about that in retrospect?
Yeah, we had a lot of good moments out there together. I remember like, I think it was just after that happened a couple of times. We were leapfrogging a lot for like the first 70 miles, but just after like Cal 1, there's a little punchy uphill and I was feeling really good on all the uphills. I don't know why. I wasn't feeling great on the downhills. Tyler would catch back up to me and pass me at every downhill, but for some reason my legs like weren't feeling the uphill. And so I could just kind of plow up any of those. And I think he did tell me after he was watching me go up one of those and he was like, oh, that's too hard of an effort for right now. He's going to come back. But yeah, I was able to feel good and hang on to that.
Not too bad, man, to gain separation from Tyler Green on Cal Street in your first 100 miler. Of course, like I said, 14:40, good for only 5th place this year, even though it's like the 10th fastest time ever. You would have won the race like 45 times in 48 runnings or something like that.
I know. And actually, maybe that's, you were talking about like things that set me up well. I think that's also another thing that set me up well. Like if this had been last year and that had been like I had been competing for first place, I might not have trusted myself to be in that situation and I might have backed off because I didn't feel like I belonged there. But because everyone was so fast and everyone was up there, I thought like, yeah, this seems like a good spot to be. Like not everybody can die. So like some of us have got to be in the right spot right now. So I felt more confidence in being there because everybody was.
Actually, so build on that a little bit more, because in the Freetrail article that Herbert wrote, you said something like, I was surprised with how good I felt late in the race. And I was also surprised that nobody was coming back to me, that I wasn't catching people. So I'm sure a lot of people would love to hear just that dynamic inside the men's top 10 this year when everybody was historically fast, and, what the psychology was like for yourself as you were battling into the top 5 in what was a incredibly memorable edition of the Western States.
Yeah. At like mile 18 or something, like the second aid station, I was with Tyler Green and we hit that aid station and he looked down at his watch and he was like, that's like 10 minutes faster than I hit this last year. We're on like 14:10 pace or something like that. There's no way that at that point we were maybe like 11th or something, like 11th and 12th. And he's like, there's no way that 10 people ahead of us all are going sub 14:30. And he was right about that. But then as the race went on, like I asked him again at like mile, 40, like, all right, how are we doing? And he's like, there's no way that 5 people go sub 15. Like basically no one expected that. No one thought we were going to all go that fast.
Everybody expected the carnage to happen. And it just never happened. Yeah,
exactly. Like based on historical times, there was no way that even 3 people should have been sub 14, 14:50, 15. And so kept just expecting people to come back. Nobody was coming back. And around like mile 50, I remember mile 50 was like a really cool moment for me because I realized it was halfway. And I also realized that I still felt really good. And I just thought like usually even during like 50Ks or shorter races, I don't hit halfway thinking like I can totally do that again. Usually I hit halfway and I'm like, that was hard. I got to slow down a little. How am I going to do that again? And I hit mile 50 and thought like, I can totally do what I just did again. And I was on like 1440-ish pace. Like I pretty close to even split that race. And I think I gained a lot of confidence feeling that and started pushing a little harder because I kind of didn't want to, like, I wanted it to be hard and I was hoping that it would get really hard. And so I started pushing a little more after mile 50, but also just thinking like at some point at mile 80 or something, like this deep darkness is going to hit and I'm going to have to go into the pain cave and it's going to get really rough. And like that just never happened. And I think it's because I didn't push myself enough early enough, but I slowly worked my way up to top 5. And then I felt like I had a very fast split from mile, like Golden Gate to the finish. I gave it everything I had, but at that point there wasn't enough room to make up more ground and I wasn't able to move any farther up. But I still don't feel like I got to that super dark place and like I really got everything out of myself. So that is like the little part of me that kind of wants to do Western States again, is like, what would it be like if I pushed harder earlier?
Well, don't get used to that, buddy. I mean, usually that darkness comes, right? Yeah. So the challenge for you is having nailed your 100-mile debut on the biggest stage to not assume that that's how all 100-milers go, because that darkness will come for you eventually. But you just obviously walked me into the obvious next question, which was in the Freetrail article, Herbert makes it clear that at least at the time that we published it, you were unsure as to whether or not you were going to accept your invitation back to Western States to wear the M5 bib, citing the fact that you don't love doing that type of training, which I interpreted to mean that you prefer doing more like higher vert stuff than faster turnover. You can feel free to comment on that, but I'm sure the audience would love to know how you're thinking about the end of next June and whether or not you'll wear that M5 bib.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. Like I like skiing in the winter and not going down and running faster 50Ks every couple of weekends and feeling like I need to be running faster, in my opinion, more boring terrain. I like getting up into the more fun stuff, but it is often less applicable to Western States. And I also just feel like, especially after doing CCC this year and having that be my third time doing it and just feeling like something was missing. Like, I don't know. It's hard for me to find the same passion for a race doing it multiple times in a row. And I think I can still think of reasons to get excited about it and passionate about it. But then there's also so many different directions that I could go. And then it's hard to, I'm in a good spot where I can do a lot of different races, and it's hard to want to do something that I just did, especially when I feel like I kind of nailed it and don't have too much more. Like, yeah, I could do better. I could do 20 minutes better maybe, and like maybe be pushing for the podium and but also I could do an hour worse. And like, I know how that feels in my head of like, it's basically a failure unless I do better than 5th place in 1440 next year is how I would kind of go into it, whether I like it or not. And I don't love that kind of mentality going into a race versus like, oh, I want redemption to represent my country and focusing more on that. Or like, there's some World Trail Major races that are calling my name and seem really fun. I hear Gorge 100K might be a good race to do this year.
Let's go.
Yeah, I think focusing more on that kind of thing is also really appealing.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, you got to want it, right? To wear that M5 bib, you got to do it justice. You got to really, really want it. We hope you'll be there, but obviously you make the right decision for yourself. So we can start winding down, but obviously you want to touch on CCC because I think there's some important lessons here too. Coming off the major high of Western States, even before the fact, you sort of posted some things that made it feel like you were ambivalent about taking the start line there in Courmayeur for the 3rd time. You posted a couple of things that I want to have you comment on here. This came from your Strava. So you posted like 3 learnings from it, one of which was just like the power of community and your crew, et cetera. So we don't need to touch on that. That's obvious. But the first one that you posted was, I have a lot more fun racing if I have a clear goal and go into it with the intention to for sure finish. So what that means is basically you went into CCC without that clear intention and a clear goal. Say more about that.
I even though I never got to a super dark place during Western States, it took a lot out of me. And I didn't realize that until I started trying to train for CCC. And it was like weird things were happening to my body that I couldn't explain, except for this must be somehow related to having done Western States. But like, I could not get my heart rate up on any run. And like, so I would try and run hard for a minute, couldn't get my heart rate up, and I'd have to slow down. And it was just like all these weird, like overtraining symptoms kind of, but I hadn't been training much. It was just, I think, like left over from the race.
Dude, and Western States takes it out of you.
It's so hard to actually do like the running motion for that long versus like a more hikey, verty race. Yeah. It really drains you. And so, and I had gone into Western States with I even, like I said, I make a spreadsheet for everything. In my Western States spreadsheet, I wrote like, this is the only race that matters to me this year. If I get injured or like, if I kill myself basically trying to finish this thing, I'm okay with it. I just want to nail Western States. And so I think I managed that, but I then didn't have much left in the tank after. And when I tried to start training again for CCC, things were going bad, but I thought it would be fun to go out to Chamonix anyway. I had been wanting to go out to Chamonix without the pressure of a race over my head for a long time because I wanted to do things like climb Mount Blanc. And so I thought, no matter what, I want to go out there. I want to hang out with my friends. I want to climb Mount Blanc, and cherry on top would be racing if I happened to feel okay. And even like the week of the race, I still wasn't sure if I wanted to go start or not because I didn't feel awesome. But then finally, like the day before, I was like, I'll give it a shot. I'm out here. I may as well. I feel like all right. And I'll just drop out if things get hard. And that's I've learned now that does not work for me because things get hard really quickly in any race. And I think I had like forgotten that. But I went out there, things got hard by mile 20. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just drop out. And then I came into every cruise spot with the intention of dropping out. And every time just got told like, you may as well go run to the next one. Just like keep going, see how you feel. And so it was just like from basically a constant state of feeling like I was about to drop out and like I was just going to go see how I feel to the next spot. And that is not it's not racing. It's just like surviving.
Yeah. You rallied and finished 12th. And actually it reminds me of that post that Mike McMonagle put up after UTMB, where he posted a screen cap of a text exchange that he had with Leah, and Mike is suffering in the very early phases of UTMB, and Leah used you as an example. Like Caleb wanted to quit. He was in 31st place. He just finished 12th at CCC. So, anything can happen.
Those guys. I had my little mini phone in my pocket and I called those guys at mile 29. And I knew Mike was starting UTMB like later that day. And I was like, dude, I don't want to do this. Like, talk me out of dropping, like give me some reason to do it. And he's like, you got to do it, man. We can both be finishers this year. Like you got to, I don't know. They were really supportive. They talked me back into like continuing to run. And it was funny to see Leah then use that later on Mike.
Yeah. The other thing that you posted in your Strava, which you've already sort of mentioned, but just to drive it home, again, You'd finished 17th, 13th. This time you finished 12th. And one of your other takeaways was, as you just mentioned with Western States, it's hard for you to stay motivated when you've done something multiple times in the past, even if, at least from my perspective, you certainly haven't really nailed CCC in the way that you can. Yeah. Anything you want to say about that?
I mean, I think you said it. Like I knew going into that race that I felt like I should be top 10. Like I was like, at the very least, I want to be top 10. Like I almost felt like it wasn't even worth me finishing if I wasn't. And I think that's part of why I was considering dropping out so much, because I could see top 10 getting away from me. And in retrospect, if I had the right mindset, I still think I could have pulled off top 10 on the day. I was 4 minutes off 9th, I think. So like it wasn't a huge gap. I just was, I don't know. It's hard not to get caught up in that and like feel like it's a loss if you're not constantly improving. And I knew I had gotten 17th and 13th. Like I felt very confident in I can get top 20, and I didn't want another one of those. If I was going to do it, I wanted some significant improvement, and I could see that getting away from me. And so that was demoralizing. And I think because I had just done well at Western States, even though it's not CCC, I was kind of comparing that to, and I was like, okay, well, if I don't get top 5 again, like then it's kind of like, basically my expectations for myself had gotten higher. And I think that can sometimes be valuable, but not if you let it get in your head and depress you. And I think that's what happened for that race.
Yeah, really interesting. Good learning. So where have you been since? How's the body feel? How's the mind coming around after a big year? Obviously, 4 early 50Ks, you went all the way to Madeira, smashed that 85K, had the race of your life at Western States, slogged through CCC. Now you're in Mexico. I saw you did the whirl in the Wasatch, sort of a monster slow adventure day. How are you feeling as we head into the final months of the year? Do you have your mojo and energy back?
Yeah, I think so. I actually think in a weird way, CCC was sort of like a nice rust buster. Like, I think I felt like I was in a weird funk all the way from Western States till CCC. Something about getting in a good effort day and finishing that race after a few days, I actually felt great. I think I felt better a week after CCC than I did leading into it. And so then I've just been having fun since then, basically. Like I have been, like you said, I did the whirl. I've been just having good local adventures in the Wasatch, getting out and crewing some people at different races. I went out to Run Rabbit this year, and that was fun to see. But yeah, I think the pressure is kind of low for this Mexico race. I'm more in it for the experience and to kind of see what happens racing at altitude. But got this going, and then no other races planned for the rest of the year. So I'm in more of kind of fun and maintenance mode, and then probably going to kick off the season fairly early next year. So I'll have to get back into training kind of soon. But yeah, for now, just taking it easy.
Rad, dude. Well, congrats on all your success. It feels like that even in the early phases of your career, you've learned a lot, and you have already established like a great resume for yourself and a great platform to build off with many, many years ahead of you to continue improving. I close all these conversations with the same question for everybody. So my closing question to you, Caleb, is who is one person that you admire? Can be inside or outside of sport, living or dead. Why do you admire that person?
Yeah, tough question. There's a lot of people I admire, but I think kind of an easy top of mind answer was I admire my mom. Growing up, she got into like endurance sports and was a great mom and like always really involved in the community. She does tons of Ironmans and marathons, and she's gotten into trail running and done a few 50Ks. And it's been fun seeing her. She's kind of an expert at like balancing lots of things and being good at lots of things at the same time. And so seeing like she's a nurse, she's involved in her community. She still does a ton for our family. And she is like, really, she's like top of her age group for like Ironman races and stuff like that. She is an inspiration. And I think growing up, having that kind of role model set me up to be into the kind of things that I'm into now. So yeah, I think she's a great inspiration.
Damn, that's awesome. Moms are amazing. It was my wife's birthday yesterday. So nice. We had a good celebration for her too. Well, Caleb, congrats on all your accomplishments, man. Good luck down there in Mexico. And thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks.